So what I'm plotting here, instead of the economists will correct for inflation, they'll make it year over year changes, da 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 da. And by the time they finish, I can't interpret anything on the graph. So this is a straight linear graph, zeros at the bottom of the page, and I'm plotting what the United States paid for domestic plus imported oil as a percentage of the gross domestic product. Gross national product, if I have it right, includes what's produced inside the United States, plus the money that Dow Chemical brings home from their overseas operations. But the gross domestic product is just that which is produced inside the U.S. So this is the percentage of our income that's paid out each year for oil. Of course, down to these two peaks show up. And the right-hand one is what we're in now. And the price has dropped. It was under $40 a barrel. It was about $38 a barrel for West Texas Intermediate this morning. And the fright at the moment in the industry is, oil may go down as low as it did in the late 1990s, and less than 1%, and they're canceling contracts to build new drilling rigs, they're canceling drilling programs, they're putting developments on hold, largely because of the threat. They don't know how low the price is going to go. And you don't want to borrow $4 billion to start another Canadian oil sands project and have the price go down for several years, and the bank wants their money back. So the hit, as you well know, especially as you know in Michigan, has had enormous consequences. But to my surprise, this graph shows the same size excursion happening in the early 1980s. Now the first step upwards, right here, is the Yom Kippur War and the Arab oil embargo. And that took the price up to where we were paying 3% of our gross income. And then the big spike is the Shah leaving Iran, and along with him they kicked out the oil company, which used to be the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, but it's what we now know as BP. And the Iraq-Iran war occupied most of the 1980s, and those two caused production in Iraq and Iran to take 4 million barrels a day off the world oil market. It may have been 5. And incidentally, if you need a nice term paper project, going back and looking at the history of what was going on and what oil prices were doing in that peak may have an important lesson. The OPEC people seem to have taken it as an important lesson. We killed the goose that laid the golden egg. And so OPEC then went to a price target of $22 to $28 a barrel. If it went above 28, they could flood the world with cheap oil. If it got below 20, 22, they could cut production back. Well, in the present situation, in Matt Simmons' interpretation, they don't have any surplus production capacity. There aren't any valves that they can open up any bigger, and they're producing flat out. So the OPEC is no longer in a position to control the upside of the price of oil. They're trying to control the downside right now by cutting back production. So I was very surprised that these two peaks were about the same. Now the first one did have its consequences. I was teaching at Princeton at the time, and the faculty standard of living was going down. There was 12% inflation, and university salaries were increasing at about 3% a year. Oh, and there was one nice thing that happened out of this. when a faculty member in that era did something that he wasn't supposed to have done, you didn't have to bring charges and have hearings. You just whisper in his ear, you'll never get another raise. And with 12% inflation, you know, that's a 12% cut in salary every year. Boy, they got the hit real fast. Every one of them that I know of, the guy was gone in a year. They were all men. Was gone in a year. So, but it was the first summer that my family and I were not quite able to go on vacation. We finally scrounged enough money to go up to New England for a week, but the consequences were quite large and painful. Now the one this year seems to be bigger, and it may have been simply that the economy was more fragile, and part of that fast run-up meant that a lot of people all at once couldn't pay their mortgage payments. Now, if it had gone up slowly, then there would have been a few percent each year, and we might not have gone into the panic that has, excuse me, dropped prices so abruptly. Well, first brought them up very high and then dropped them abruptly.